Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to our Planning Board meeting, the afternoon session. We're starting with item number 7, application to file a sectional map amendment for the Clarksburg Gateway Sector Plan, where staff is recommending us to approve the transmittal of the application to file and recommend approval of the sectional map amendment, application H-162. So this afternoon, we have Clark Larson of the Planning Department presenting this item. Welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here. Thanks for inviting me over. I'm here to recommend your application to file to the County Council. With your recommendation, it will go to the council for a public hearing, 30-day notification, public hearing, and there may or may not be a work session before their vote. So this is a preliminary step before it goes to the County Council for final approval. Overall, the summary of zoning changes recommended by the 2026 Clarksburg Master Plan encompassed 604 acres of land to be changed in one way or another. And also the plan reconfirms existing zoning districts for approximately 242 acres. In addition, there are 4 individual areas comprising, I think it's only like 3 types of TDRs, but 4 individual pieces of the transferable development rights overlay zone that will be extinguished and go away because of the plan's recommendation. These essentially have already been exercised. There are developments here that realized the TDR densities and additional development that was enabled by them. And so for approximately 162 acres within the plan area, the plan recommends that they just be removed as an overlay zone. So this is the overall recommended zoning plan for the adopted plan. Essentially, many of the existing zones that are now employment office or low-density residential were recommended to go into either a CR, commercial residential zone, or a commercial residential town zone to either reflect existing development and density or to allow more flexibility between commercial, residential, and other types of uses to be established on some properties. Not all that were rezoned, but some properties will be able to realize some of these changes with the recommended zoning map. And then I wanted to highlight just the one smaller area that the County Council actually revised from the Planning Board draft. It's actually 3 properties that the council increased the maximum total floor-to area ratio and the residential floor-to area ratio limit by just 1/4 of an FAR, 1/4 of density. And this is to accommodate just slightly higher development density that's being proposed in these areas. This area outlined in red is at the intersection of Observation Drive and Shawnee Lane. There's already a Housing Opportunities Commission multi-unit development that is being proposed at the southwest corner, and on the east corner we expect some sort of attached residential to come in the future. So it was a small change, but essentially the council upheld and supported all the other zoning recommendations from the Planning Board. And so in summary, we recommend approval of the request to file. This will then go to the County Council as an application for the sectional map amendment H-162 to implement the zoning recommendations of the approved and adopted Clarksburg Gateway Sector Plan.
Thank you so much, Mr. Larson, Mr. Ziegler. I can't state how many times, and the board has said, we love this plan for economic development, for housing, for the connection of Observation Drive, the completion of Observation Drive, and for we just think it's an amazing project. So thank you so much. Thank you and your team for the years of working on this, and I enthusiastically support moving forward. Okay.
I have the same sentiment, so I'm not going to repeat it, but I'm hoping that this is not going to be the last time we see you here. Maybe, maybe you can come. I know it's going to be other projects.
Just the beginning.
Yeah. I don't know what is the process, but I'm hoping that when you have a good news or something that you see is moving, give us some update that, because this was one of the master plans that it seemed like that we had developers standing by. As soon as this is approved, they take it and run with it, and hopefully we see something happening soon. So you have good news. Please share it with us. Make us happy. Maybe while we are here, we see some
I
improvement.
can promise to share with you. I can't promise to make you happy. But I think you will be seeing some movement happening in the near future, both on the development side and hopefully the capital improvement side soon as well.
Don't make him promise anything.
But no, I see him there. I'll be happy. Okay, thank you.
Any questions or comments from the other board members? Well, do I have a motion to approve transmittal of the application to file the sectional map amendment to the council?
Yeah. I'll move to approve the request to file and recommend the approval of the sectional map amendment.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The ayes have it, 5-0. Thank you so much. We're going to take a 1-minute break to switch over to the next item, which is the Innovation Lab presentation. Thank you. Good afternoon. We're on item number 6, Innovation Lab presentation, where staff is giving the planning board presentation on the first Innovation Lab project, Green Street Design Framework, Greening Our Streets Thoughtfully. So thank you so much, and we have a team of, I'm not sure who's leading this thing, but could you introduce yourselves, and we look forward to your presentation.
So I will start and kick them off, and then they can introduce themselves after. But I'm Christina Sorrento, and I am very, very happy to be here so that the first ever Innovation Lab team can present to the board and to tell you what we've been up to. So Innovation Lab is kind of a brainchild of really allowing the planners an opportunity to work on cutting edge planning ideas, kind of passion projects, things that they would love to be working on, but maybe don't have time in their regular, work schedule to do that. And find a way that we can give them the time to work on them, and then we can implement it into the work that we are doing. The opportunity to really think outside the box of what they're doing on an everyday basis. And the reorg was really the perfect springboard for us to start this innovation lab, because we thought that it would be best to be done across the three of the functional teams. So design, placemaking, and policy, transportation and planning, and environment and climate division. And really the goal with that was finding a way to meet all of our goals, because we think that we are stronger when we work together instead of, working at odds. And we really wanted to, some of the things that, people said from the past of when we had these divisions separated was that it became siloed. Well, we didn't want to have siloed divisions. We wanted to make sure that we could find a way to meet all of the goals that we have. So this was one way to do it. And we really wanted the team to take a yes and approach. So no silos, get more when we're trying to work together to get a common purpose. And the benefits, I think, have, and the team could tell you, but they've found a way, they don't usually work together in this capacity. And so it's really building a teamwork, environment that they would not normally have, but also giving them a chance to do work that's going to be extremely beneficial for the department. So the way that the Innovation Lab was set up is this first one has a 5-person team. They're spending 10% of their time over 90 days to develop an innovative approach to a topic that they felt strongly about. And this particular topic was Green Street Design Framework, finding a way to have greener streets, have more tree canopy, more vegetation, more pervious surfaces, but also getting all the transportation pieces we want with, pedestrian and bicycle movements, and also the design that we want so that the streets are activated and people really want to be there. So that was the goal of this team's approach, and I'm going to turn it over to David Ansbacher to talk a little bit more about this.
Good afternoon. For the record, David Ansbacher. I'm the Chief of the Transportation Planning Division. We are all very excited to be here today. The team has come up with some really innovative ideas. Of course, coming up with these ideas doesn't necessarily translate them into our policies and practices and law, but fortunately, we have a work program item before us that will give us the opportunity to look at what they've come up with and consider how we can incorporate them into our everyday policies and practices. That work program item is a joint project with MCDOT and DPS to really work to expand the Green Streets chapter of the Complete Streets Design Guide. If you flip through this really thick document, only about 10 pages are on green streets, so I think there's a lot of opportunity for looking at best practices and trying to flesh those out. Of course, these are, at this point, very high-level recommendations. We've really asked the team to think outside the box, but when we sit down with our colleagues at MCDOT, at DPS, when we hear back from the development industry and from others, there's gonna, some of these might ultimately go forward. Some of them might not be ready right now. But we do think that they are very innovative. They do have the potential to solve a number of issues.
And just to close out the comments from this part and turn it over to the team, I think a couple of things I just want to point out for the board why this work matters. You'll see that most of the streets that are being thought about in this creative manner are streets that will go through our downtowns and town centers and will be our future growth corridors. So the ideas here are extremely important to consider seriously moving forward if we want these streets to become safe, attractive places that underpin economic development and safeguard public health. I think that's really, really important that we get these streets to a place that is a much higher functioning complete street model than what you currently see outside the window, for example. Anybody who has gone outside in June to go across Georgia Avenue and get a cup of coffee from Safeway knows exactly the oppressive heat, the blaring traffic, and the lack of sort of pedestrian amenities that one has to encounter. These are not the types of places we want to locate future development along. So the work that you're seeing here is starting to ideate on how to get to a much better condition. And the last thing I will say is that there's a lot of material that the team has presented, is going to present today, and it is truly built up as a thriller. So the best parts are at the end, so I hope the board will give them the opportunity to kind of tell the whole story. and that the team did this work at startup speed. This was truly done incredibly fast. So of course, there are things that need further exploration, but the core ideas are strong. We're all very excited about it, and we all just want to commend the team here in front of the board for doing this work. Thank you. So I'll turn it over to Justine.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. For the record, this is Justine Ivan with the Transportation Planning Division, and today, alongside my colleagues Sophia Aldrich, Molly Salmons, Natasha Fahim, and Dominic Bello, we will be presenting to you the Green Streets Design Framework, Greening Our Streets Thoughtfully. And as it was mentioned before, this is an effort from the first cohort of the Innovation Lab team to find a way to uniformly and adequately incorporate street trees into downtown and town center streets and boulevards across Montgomery County. Today, we will be walking you through a series of elements that include Innovation Lab process, problem statement, goals, objectives, Green Streets considerations, solutions, implementation challenges, and then finally recommendations. And so we would like to start this presentation by giving a little bit more background and context on what the Innovation Lab is. So as it was previously mentioned, the Innovation Lab is a technical cross-division effort from the Environment and Climate Division, Design and Placemaking Division, and the Transportation Division that aims to challenge planners to think outside of the box to find innovative solutions to address complicated problems around Montgomery County. And so a couple of months ago, the technical division chiefs, Dave, Christina, and Atul created a working session to convene all technical planners. And during that working session, planners were able to express challenges to achieve adequate allocation and preservation of desirable facilities, amenities, infrastructure, and environmental features throughout Montgomery County. During that working session, we were also asked to brainstorm topics to solve some of these problems and hurdles, and various topics were suggested. And then the chief selected as the first topic for research the Green Streets Design Framework, which is a topic that we will be discussing today. And here you have the first cohort of the Innovation Lab, which is composed of us. And we volunteer and devoted our time to this project for the past months. And I also wanted to mention that a couple of weeks ago, the Innovation Lab team presented the findings to the technical divisions and gathered their feedback and input, and we were able to incorporate that feedback into what you will see here today. So this is a collective effort from other experienced planners as well. And so this is our first research topic out of many topics that we will be researching in the upcoming months and also presenting to you as well. And finally, I want to clarify that this presentation is only for awareness and discussion and requires no planning board action, and that this is only an internal effort, and therefore there was no outside consultation with other agencies of the county and the state. And so we can start off our topic of discussion with the problem statement. And there is a problem in Montgomery County, and the problem is that planners and developers and decision makers after facing challenges in creating downtown and town center streets that are attractive, comfortable, and environmentally resilient. For example, the lack of tree canopy along these streets create conditions of extreme heat, declining air quality, and vulnerability towards extreme weather events, which translate into unpleasant and undesirable conditions for pedestrians and cyclists. For area residents, it's even more appealing as deteriorating settings such as this lead to negative cognitive and health problems. And so we have the Silver Spring Streetscape Standards, which is a similar effort, and it provides detailed guidance on street tree planning, but it's only tailored to a specific location rather than the entire county. And now this is where the proposed Green Streets Design Framework comes in to provide a unified county-wide approach for urban tree planning along downtown and town center boulevards and streets by integrating transportation, environment, and urban design disciplines, and considering the benefits of doubling down the efforts to adequately plant street trees. And so for this project, we have set a couple of goals, but for the sake of time, we have summarized this into one. And it is to increase and sustain tree canopy along downtown and town center streets and boulevards in Montgomery County to improve the pedestrian and cyclist experience, increase environmental resilience, and support long-term health and economic vitality. And in alignment with the aforementioned goal, we have also summarized the list of objectives, and we can potentially outline this as number one, identify potential challenges to design parameters of downtown and town center boulevards and streets. Number two, determine key variables when selecting tree species. Number three, highlight limitations to implementation. And number four, to develop recommendations and address limitations. And so now I'll turn it over to my colleague, Molly Sammons.
Thank you, Justine. Molly Stamets for the record. So before discussing the elements that can be incorporated for greener street design, it's important that we contextualize some of the environmental threats that downtown and town center areas face in the county. So it's vital that we design streets that are resilient to climate change. The urban heat island effect occurs in cities and urban areas as man-made surfaces trap heat. This results in higher temperatures than temperatures in nearby rural or forested areas. According to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, on average, cities tend to be 7.2 degrees Fahrenheit hotter than nearby rural areas. Sometimes less than that, but that is an extreme difference. So this map you see here on the right shows the air temperature taken on the same day in August in different parts of Montgomery County. The red areas on the map, which correspond to the highest temperatures on that day, are most present in the denser areas of the county, which overlaps with downtown and town center areas. Our colleagues, Steve and Tina, with support from members of the Environment and Climate Division, gave a presentation on planning for urban heat earlier this year, if you recall. And in their presentation, they discussed this heat map along with much more regarding projections and strategies that we can use to mitigate heat. And in our design framework, we aim to implement some of their strategies and recommendations by designing for the present and future of heat in the county. There's also several types of pollution that afflict downtown and town center street areas. This includes increased precipitation events, partly due to climate change, which causes runoff and erosion, and this contributes to water pollution. Air pollution caused by gases and particulate matter coming from vehicle emissions, driving by, and industrial activities in the area can also be addressed through part of our framework. And light pollution, which occurs in urban areas, especially during the evening and night when lights are still on, even though it's supposed to be dark outside according to nature. This can cause harmful impacts on tree growth and wildlife as it is artificial. So I also want to touch on part of what Atul was talking about with Thrive 2050 and some of the cumulative benefits that this framework tries to address, is that the inclusion of trees, vegetation, and green elements overall within downtown and town center streets overlaps with our existing goals and can help us achieve what we want to see. And some of these outcomes we are reaching for with Thrive 2050 are for racial equity and social justice, environmental resilience, and economic competitiveness. And given that downtown and town center streets overlap with the corridor-focused development, this will help achieve, many co-benefits. There's a lot of benefits, so I'm gonna try to keep it brief, but there's a lot to list, so bear with me. But good street design can have a hugely positive impact on equity issues and public health, since public downtown and town center areas are accessible to everyone. People from all walks of life share streets. They use them to get to work, on their way to dinner, picking up their kids from school. We've all been there for any number of reasons. So by designing greener street systems, we can address several forms of pollution, as aforementioned. So air pollution can be mitigated with the presence of large, healthy trees, as they act as natural air purifiers by dispersing and removing pollutants such as carbon dioxide, nitrogen dioxide, and particulate matter. Further, healthy trees provide more oxygen for us to breathe and improve respiratory health. A 2023 study published by the National Library of Medicine found that increased greenness in an area has beneficial effects on respiratory health, and in particular, respiratory mortality, lung cancer incidence, and respiratory hospitalizations and lung function. So water pollution can also be addressed through the presence of healthy trees. As they reach their full growth potential, they can filter out pollutants and stop things that would otherwise enter our waterways. Cleaner soil can also be achieved as trees and vegetation stabilize soil. They promote further water infiltration, and they also add organic materials back to the soil, which provides essential nutrients to wildlife. So, less pollutants in streets and their adjacent areas reduces the strain on people as they navigate streets. And public health can also be improved through decreased heat stress. As we said, urban heat is a huge increasing issue. So this can help reduce the incidences of heat strokes and other negative health impacts, and also someone's comfortability while they're navigating a street. Safety can also be improved as the spacing within the streetscapes can be done in a way to protect walkers and bikers and cars from colliding. And mature trees can also create a visual barrier between the street and the sidewalk area. A study from the University of Washington found that placing planters and trees in urban roadsides reduced mid-block crashes by 5 to 20%. So this can be hugely beneficial to safety. Greener routes can also reduce stress, as incorporating vegetation in roadside landscaping produces beneficial mood changes and tension relief. And social cohesion and community can be strengthened through comfortable streets as people are encouraged to walk, bike, and interact with their local community outside. So ecological health can be improved by providing increased habitat for local wildlife in greener streets, and this helps keep ecosystems intact and reduce fragmentation. As will be discussed later in this presentation by Dom, providing a variety of native tree and ground cover plantings can support biodiversity and continue to provide ecosystem functions amidst the changing climate if we select species appropriately. And just as discussed previously, reduced pollution and reduced heat is, of course, beneficial for human health and beneficial for the other organisms that we share the earth with. Last but not least, economic competitiveness can be improved and addressed with greener streets, as all of these combined features and benefits that they bring attract businesses and residents as it's more healthy and inviting areas to be in. There also can be decreased maintenance cost when we plan streets ahead of time very thoughtfully, as they're built to withstand future conditions to the best ability that we can predict them. So street trees are an integral part of this design framework. They're part of our essential habitat as humans and are part of our infrastructure. As illustrated in this diagram, a street tree faces circumstances that are much different than the environment that a tree would in a forest or in front of someone's home. There are several major factors that impact the health of a street tree. Some of these are the amount of soil volume that a street tree has can be limited, the compaction of soil and tree roots' access to oxygen, the ability of moisture to reach tree roots, the siting of utilities both above and below a given street tree, and excess lighting can impact tree growth. When a tree is planted, the amount of soil volume is of course important. And as you can see in both of these images, on the image to the left, when a tree does not have adequate soil for roots to grow, this can cause cracked sidewalks as they're trying to break through the surface. And this causes, future maintenance issues. Repairing a sidewalk, it can make it harder to walk down the street, especially if, you're rolling or have impaired vision. This can be a huge issue. And also it can cause trees to come down prematurely if it's becoming a constant issue with the sidewalk. On the right, you can see how this is a large canopy tree, but it was sited in conjunction with utilities, which obviously we need utilities, so something has to give. The tree ends up being cut, and it's not reaching its full potential and the benefits that it can bring. It's severely damaged. So having adequate soil is, of course, very important for a tree to grow. And one way this can be achieved is through the use of suspended sidewalks, and commonly referred to as silvacells. This is a type of suspended sidewalk. Silvacells are used to create a frame that supports sidewalks while creating a protected soil space below ground for the tree roots. Silvacells carry the weight of the pavement above, which prevents the soil from being compacted below. This allows trees to grow larger, more resilient, and live for decades. This also reduces future conflicts with the sidewalk, as it will not have to break through and crack. Continuous tree panels are another way that there can be greater soil volume. It's not seen here, but in a future slide, you'll see an example of a tree panel. And this also allows for roots to grow closer together and have more space. Further, pervious pavements can be used along streetscapes, and these can infiltrate more water, which helps with cooling and reduces runoff. And light-colored materials can also be used whenever possible because these absorb less heat, and that's definitely something we want to do. So an example of somewhere that this is being done is in Seattle. Last week, a portion of Seattle's waterfront has been officially completed, and this project created a greenway and really prioritized the health of trees and future canopy. And in coordination with the government and a company called Deeproot, silvacells were implemented along the greenway, which will help ensure trees reach maturity and are able to be stronger and more adaptive in the face of climate change. And on the left is a before image, and on the right is an after. So as you can see, it's visually much more attractive and green. So when possible, also, as I mentioned earlier, this is an example of a tree panel where the trees have more space. And when possible, we want to maximize vegetation. If there doesn't need to be pavement or other utilities or uses there, then we want to put vegetation there because this is also an essential habitat for wildlife. Not all organisms use trees. Some use ground cover, and some use both. So not only is it good for wildlife, but it also reduces more runoff and sediment pollution, and they can contribute to further cooling effects. And with that, I will hand it off to Natasha.
Good afternoon. For the record, I'm Natasha Fahim from Design Placemaking and Policy Division. So I would like to walk you through some of the urban design consideration that we had for our studies. First and foremost is the relationship between the building that fronts into the public space along the sidewalk. And no matter what the use of that building is, how that building can contribute into the greenery of the sidewalk and a public realm. Like elements such as movable planters, rain garden, and green walls that can be achieved on the base of the building. All of those are the items that we have considered through our the studies. You will see some images and drawing toward the end of our presentation. Other urban design consideration is how the building can help cool off the sidewalk through the elements that, like architectural elements like canopies, trellises, awnings that can apply into the base of the building. Other consideration that Molly emphasized on that is the safety and comfort of the pedestrian that can achieve through the lighting, decorative lighting, the lighting on the building, pedestrian scale lighting, as well as street lighting. And last but not least is the street furnitures and all the amenities such as seating elements, bike racks, trash, recycling bins, wayfinding, all the elements that can contribute into to help activating the public realm along the sidewalk. So those are all urban design considerations that we work through other division to imply to our studies. Moving forward, utility placement, I'm gonna turn it to Sophia.
Hi, for the record, Sophia Aldridge from the Transportation Planning Division. I'm also the project manager for Complete Streets Design Guide. So I was really excited to join this. The minute it came up, I volunteered right away. So this is a great opportunity. So I'm going to talk about first utility placement. In an ideal world, we would know exactly where all the utilities are. But roads have been built different ways over many, many years. So we have to be patient, but we also have to include that in our planning. We can't just plan ignorantly. We have to. So we've tried to account for where utilities can be included or where we should expect them to be. We've looked at situations where we have new or reconstructed streets. We've also looked at situations where we retrofit streets, which is really probably the majority of the road work that will occur within the county. And we have to make sure that we're really focused on trying to make sure while we're providing complete streets elements and green street elements and all these other elements that they fit together, and possibly look at the potential for some relocation to make the whole thing work better. Next slide. So as I said, the Complete Streets was just one of the two tools that we started with. Certainly the Streetscape Guidelines is the other one. But this had a very transportation-focused effort to provide design techniques across the street. It was pretty two-dimensional, didn't go underground. And so we're actually flipping it, one, going underground, and two, going 3D. So, a lot of things that we had to look at in order to figure out, is this design guide adequate right now to deal with all these issues and what things might have to change? So we certainly have to look at, one, how do we deal with retrofit and new reconstructed design guidance maybe a little bit more clearly? It's in there, but it may not be as clear as it could be. We realize that most construction projects, the right-of-way is restricted. So prioritization becomes very important. The current guide prioritizes transportation elements, and to some extent, green elements like buffers. But we may have to rethink our priorities once we start including all these other elements. And certainly we have to ensure that as we update this guide and work towards incorporating these rules, that we're consistent with all existing and new transportation rules and policies. Next slide.
Thank you, Sophia. For the record, I'm Dom Bello, Forest Conservation Inspector with the Environment and Climate Division and resident tree guy of the Innovation Lab. So I'm going to go into a little more detail about how important the certain tree species we're planting are. And I'll first start with some of the metrics for which we select street trees now. So one of the most important factors in the Silver Spring Streetscape Design Guidelines, what are the existing tree species in the area? We think about what are the proximity to overhead utilities. In the image on this slide, you'll see that that probably wasn't considered enough because the tree's canopy has been really misshapen as it grows. What is the light availability in the planting location that we have? What is the soil volume? For example, do we have access to silvacells and continuous soil? Or are we limited to a tree box, which is going to be much more restrictive for a tree's roots? And lastly, what aesthetic features are desired when we're choosing a street tree? So one of the points of emphasis in this presentation is that we need to be planting more native trees, if not exclusively native trees. So currently, non-native species are often favored, whether that's for fast rate of growth, resilience to urban conditions, widespread availability through the nursery trade. They're included on street tree planting lists, and oftentimes could be cheaper when purchased than a native alternative. But there are a couple reasons why natives are really paramount to healthy, green, sustainable streets. And the first is that native species are those that are sustaining our local wildlife and the food web. So I have here that we need to prioritize keystone species, and a keystone species is a tree species that can sustain hundreds of different species of Lepidoptera, which are our caterpillars that will ultimately become butterflies and moths. And that is the key food source for almost every type of native bird that we have in the area. So caterpillars are critically important to maintaining our bird population. And while non-native species may sustain a couple dozen different species of Lepidoptera, a keystone species like the oak genus can sustain over 500 different Lepidoptera species. Also, native species oftentimes are not favored because of a perception that they're not as attractive or pretty, but they offer both functional and ornamental value to our streetscapes, whether that's if we need a tree for shade, for beautiful spring blossoms, attractive fall color, interesting bark. There's a native species that can satisfy all of those requirements, and I'm going to highlight some of those later. But first, I want to share a real-world example of the difference when planting a non-native species versus a native. So on this next slide, you'll see here what looks like a nutrition label that we're all familiar with. This is using a software called iTree. It's an open source software that helps quantify the benefits of trees. So I've selected here an example for a non-native tree. This is a Japanese Zelkova, extremely popular street tree. If you walk a couple blocks in Wheaton, there are entire streets that are lined with Japanese Zelkova. They grow fast, they're very resilient to heat, so it's become a very popular species in Montgomery County. And using iTree, I've predicted a 10-inch Zelkova in Wheaton in excellent condition, and iTree gives me an approximation of that tree's value dollar-wise over 20 years. So I've highlighted the cumulative amount there, that's a little over $200, and then some of the metrics that iTree considers are the carbon dioxide uptake of the tree, the stormwater mitigation, and the air pollution removal. So that's a snapshot of a 20-year-old Zelkova planted in this area. Now, the next example is a pin oak, all those same factors, 10-inch diameter, excellent condition, planted in Wheaton. This is a native alternative, another large canopy tree. And you'll see the difference there in the cumulative benefits is almost twice dollar-wise what the same size Japanese Zelkova is. And the biggest difference when we break it down is that carbon dioxide uptake is almost 2.5 times as great as the Japanese Zelkova.
Can I ask one question on that? This is really interesting, and you could do an entire presentation just on this, I'm sure. But just briefly, you know, non-natives are natives elsewhere. So like, I'm assuming in Japan for the tree you mentioned, would it have different types of benefits there that we're not seeing here? Like aside from the insect population, but just focusing on like the sequestration, for example. Is it just happens to be a type of tree that doesn't have as much sequestration potential for a similar diameter trunk, or are there other reasons why it's not performing that way here, but it would somewhere else?
The biggest difference is going to be that if that Zelkova was planted in Japan, there are hundreds of insect species that have been, they've grown up feeding on that as a food source, as a pollen source. So that would be the largest difference, I would say, is in the organisms that it hosts. The climate would be different. Unfortunately, I didn't run the numbers in iTree. That would be an interesting experiment to see how that would grow in Japan versus in Wheaton. But for the purposes of this presentation, I focused just on the Montgomery County area. But here we have a side-by-side comparison just to give you a snapshot so you can see how much more impactful that pin oak is over a 20-year time span than the popular Japanese Zelkova alternative. And to put it in perspective, iTree gives you some comparisons. So that's 5,400 miles of CO2 that pin oak is absorbing, over 1,000 bathtubs worth of stormwater, and enough pollution for that number is small, 66 smartphones, the weight of 66 smartphones. So as well as considering native species, we need to plant for the future. And one of the ways we can do that is by planting a greater variety of tree species. There was a 2023 study out of California Polytechnic University that found a correlation between greater biodiversity in urban landscapes and lower maximum daily temperatures during the summer. So while the presence of trees is very important, the types of trees that we plant also can impact those daily averages. We need to choose species that are going to adapt to our changing climate. So just because a tree species is native here and grows well now does not mean that in 50 years, as the climate changes, it will continue to thrive here. So we need to look towards the future when selecting a tree that we want to be alive in 50 years. We need to consider how is our environment going to change in that time frame. We should encourage the planting of drought and disease-resistant native cultivars. A cultivar is a tree species that has been bred to exhibit a specific trait. I'm going to share some examples of that in a couple slides, but that can be drought tolerance, heat tolerance, or disease tolerance, and it's still a native species, so we still get those benefits for our native pollinators. And lastly, we really need to consider what a tree's maximum height and spread is going to be when planting near overhead utilities to avoid the misshapen canopies that you're going to see all over our presentation. So compiling all the research that we've done, all the good native alternatives that we have on offer, I've made a list here of some species that we should be planting more of. This is by no means exhaustive. There are lots of other native tree species that are great options, but I'd like to share some with you that I think are very important. So you'll see here all the factors that we've considered. For reference, we are in hardiness zone 7, so all of these species should theoretically grow well here. And I'm going to highlight 2 of these canopy trees. These are large trees at maturity, planted for shade. The first is the bald cypress. We have a couple nice bald cypress right here on Grandview, a tree that is not typically planted as a street tree, but is a great option. And also, you'll see 3 different species of elms listed here. These are all cultivars of American elm. American elm was once the most popular street tree in the US, but was decimated with the introduction of Dutch elm disease. These elm cultivars are all bred with disease tolerance in mind. So these are all found to be highly resistant to Dutch elm disease. On the left here is an image of a Jefferson American elm on the National Mall. That name comes from the fact that it was actually bred in Washington because they selected the American elms that were found to be resistant to Dutch elm disease while all the others were suffering. And on the right there is a cluster of bald cypress that are thriving in a pretty small planting space in the middle of a parking lot there where they're going to get lots of excess heat. This table highlights some of the oak species that I was speaking of earlier, those keystone species. There are a lot more different types of oaks that could be on this list, but I wanted to highlight the Nuttall oak and the pin oak that I spoke of earlier. On the left is the Nuttall oak planted very close to the street above a retaining wall, exhibiting some of that nice fall color and a full canopy. And on the right is a row of pin oaks planted along a streetscape, also exhibiting fall color. And I included the image here of a chickadee enjoying one of those Lepidoptera species that could be found on these oaks. So this portion are some of the understory tree species that are well suited to our goals. These are typically going to be more tolerant of shade, whether that be partial or full shade. And these are the species that I would look to when selecting a species. We need to be attractive with beautiful blooms or berries. So the first one here is a southern crabapple, and I'm also going to highlight a cultivar of an American dogwood, Appalachian spring. American dogwood is typically prone to a spring disease called anthracnose, which will cause early defoliation, lack of blossoms. The Appalachian spring has been cultivated to be resistant to anthracnose. On the left there is the southern crabapple in full bloom during the spring. Does a good impression of the famous flowering cherry from this area, but the difference is this is a native variety, whereas the flowering cherry is not. On the right is that Appalachian spring dogwood, also in full bloom in the early spring, exhibiting its beautiful white flowers. I have a couple different species of hawthorn listed here, as this is not one that I see get planted very often in streetscapes, and it really should be. You can see both the winter king and the cockspur hawthorn here are drought, air pollution, and salt tolerant, as well as being very attractive trees. So the image on the left there is the winter king hawthorn with its spring white blossoms. The middle image there is the cockspur hawthorn during late summer, early fall, where it started to defoliate but exhibits these wonderful red berries that are not only attractive but are a food source for birds. And lastly is the downy serviceberry in full bloom in front of a building there. This is a nice large shrub, small tree that has great attractive properties. So taking into account everything that I've just mentioned, one of our recommendations as part of the Innovation Lab is to develop a decision matrix that is used when deciding tree species for a given location. And this echoes what I said in my first slide, but to summarize, we need to look at the existing tree inventory, the condition of those trees, and the existing diversity. So for example, if a street has 100% pin oaks and we're looking to replace a tree for maintenance reasons, we should probably plant something other than a pin oak to increase the diversity on that street. The existing heat island effects, if we're having issues with extreme heat in an area, we probably want to prioritize those large canopy tree species rather than the understory trees that need more shade. The impacts of the street orientation and adjacent buildings, how are they going to cast shade onto a given area and for how long during the day. The overhead utilities, we need to stop planting these huge oaks and elms immediately under overhead power lines. That misshapes the canopy of the tree, it leads to premature removal, and it increases safety risks for pedestrians and for traffic. The soil volume, in a perfect world, we would have silvacells in all our streetscapes. Unfortunately, that's not the case today, so we need to look at the space that we have to work with and consider that when planting a tree. What will grow here 20 years from now, so just because something grows well today does not mean it's going to be resistant to the increasing temperatures and air pollution of the future. And lastly, what are the sunlight needs of the tree and the location on the street section? So if we know that an area is going to be shaded for half of the day, that really limits our options of what we can plant there and what will thrive.
Can I ask one question on this part too, the decision matrix piece? If I'm understanding a little bit of a different piece of this, which is that different trees also have different potentials for different things. Like in the tool you showed before, I saw at the very bottom there was like how much PM 2.5 is it capturing, and that brought up the idea that maybe obviously you all have been working on this, but the thought that it spurred for me was like maybe an additional possible thing on the matrix could be, what is the problem of the street? What are some of the problems of the street? And like, is it an arterial? Maybe are we trying to capture more air pollution in this particular area? And knowing that we have a tool like that at our disposal, which tree has higher potential for PM 2.5 capture, or obviously carbon capture, but things like that. So perhaps that could be, in addition to all these things, like
Absolutely,
what
and some
problem are we trying to
species are
solve?
going to be much more tolerant of air pollution than others. So if we know it is a high traffic area with, multiple lanes of traffic all hours of the day, we're not going to want to plant a species that's intolerant of air pollution. So yeah, that is an important factor to consider.
All right, so I'm going to help transform us or push us towards more looking back at how we actually implement a complete street with all these elements combined. I do want to mention that many of the things that Dominic, Natasha, and Molly have been talking about weren't considered in the Silver Spring Streetscape Standards, which was a marvelous document and was, in part our inspiration to really try to develop something that would work for the whole county. So now, as we start to look at this, we do have to consider two different types of construction, as I mentioned earlier. One for new and reconstructed streets where we can do, the ideal, hopefully. And on those kind of facilities, we're going to be able to put all of the public realm improvements into what is called the active zone. And that means that the bike facilities, the pedestrian facilities, the trees, and the public space all will be essentially on a space that's protected from motor vehicles. Retrofit street designs is probably what we do primarily in the county because we have constrained space and definitely moving curb is very expensive. So for retrofit designs, we typically provide the bike facility in the street zone. Usually there was either a travel lane there before or on-street parking. And so we had to look at both of them. And so when we start to present the solutions, we're going to start with the new reconstructed because that was, greater opportunity. The retrofit, there's more challenges. Next slide. So as part of this, one of the things that we discovered is that, when we started looking at things like climate change and the need for shade and, the cooler streets, is that one tree planting zone in the active zone isn't enough. So where possible, we were proposing a minor tree planting zone and a major tree planting zone. And we'll talk about where, this will be mostly in boulevard designs, but potentially also in street designs as well. We've also looked very carefully at the location of lighting in relation to the tree canopy, because that's an important sort of three-dimensional view that we haven't looked at currently in the Complete Streets Design Guide that we now have to look at very carefully. And as they mentioned, lighting is good, but it also can be detrimental to environmental quality. Next slide. So here's some lighting examples, just to give you what we're going to be looking at is, you can provide large street lights that provide street for the street zone. You can also provide pedestrian scale lighting, more like the ones you see on the left, and actually in the middle as well. And you also can provide lighting that achieves both, which an engineering term was combination pole. It had street lights on one side and then ped scale lighting on the other side. Next slide. So we take all of these things that we've developed and looked at to inform us on how we actually can do this. We wanted to develop a consistent approach, really to deal with street sections in downtown and town center streets and boulevards. We wanted to improve the way that green streets were considered to help us more highly prioritize environmental elements, and certainly looking at tree species diversity and health, considering cooler streets. We certainly have to be aware that stormwater management rules have changed in the county, and so that may become much more important to try to accommodate some of that need on the street. And as we do these designs, being cognizant of where existing utilities are, and sort of looking at how we can accommodate them and still achieve our goals at the surface of the street. Next slide. All right, so now we're going to move into solutions, and I wish I was presenting this section, but I'll start off and then pass it on to Natasha, who gets all the good stuff. So the green area highlighted in the slide is the active zone, as I mentioned. So starting from the left, there's a frontage zone, which is typically an area in front of a building, which can include sidewalk cafes. It can just include some extra pedestrian space. We then have a clear zone or a sidewalk area, which is where pedestrians walk. We then have in some streets, we'll have a pedestrian bike buffer just to separate the sidewalk from the bike lane. We then have the bike lane, and then we have a street buffer, which is where the trees are provided. And then, as I mentioned, there's a curbside zone, which if we're talking retrofit, that would actually be where the bike lane would go. Next slide. So what we looked at as part of this is really trying to expand the options that we provide within our existing zones in complete streets. So looking at the frontage zone, the sidewalk zone, and the street buffer and bike facility zones, we've identified additional categories to add. For frontage zone, we've broken that area out into an amenity zone and a rain garden zone. For the sidewalk zone, we've broken it out into a clear zone and a utility zone. And then for the street buffer and bike lane, we've identified minor tree planting zone, bike facility zone, and major tree planting zone. So in some cases, it may be exactly the same as what's in complete streets today, but in other cases, it may require some significant changes. Next slide. And we started to put some of the design parameters that are in complete streets into a chart, because that's what complete streets does pretty well in addition to some of the visuals. So what I'll point out here, this table identifies the 4 different street types that we're looking at: downtown streets, town center streets, downtown boulevards, and town center boulevards. It identifies a range of design values from minimum to default, which is the second column. And then up on the top, there's the most colorful row identifies the existing street zones as defined in complete streets: the frontage zone, the sidewalk zone, et cetera. The additional zones that we're proposing are shown in the light blue row. So you can see amenity zone, rain garden, utility zone, clear zone, default ped bike buffer, which is actually the minor tree planting zone, the bike lane, and then the major tree planting zone. And then I just want to note there's something called add for recess parking. We're also trying to take into account that, especially because we might want to slow traffic down, the idea of providing on-street parking might be very, very desirable. And we have a tool for taking the buffer and making it 3 feet wider, and then between the trees, providing parking where it's needed. The table summarizes the total soil volume width, which is highlighted in brown. And we did a similar table for the retrofit section, and it much smaller benefits. So a new construction with Silva-Cell's usage, we can really interconnect these 2 tree zones and really make it extremely wide. The other thing I will note is that the challenges for this, you can see the total width is showed on the far right. This is the total width of generally the active zone. So on a downtown boulevard or a town center boulevard, we're likely to have rights of way in the range of anywhere from 80 to 150 feet in width. Some of these measurements, they could fit in there. Downtown streets and town center streets, the total default width, we're usually only going to have 70 to 80 feet. And 43.5 and 40.5 is more than half. So we realize that in those areas, prioritization is extremely important, because we're not going to have that space. Or we're going to have to think about how do we accommodate that.
I hope that on some level, part of that prioritization involves whether cars need as much space as they currently have. Because we're talking about fitting everything into a non-motor vehicle portion of the right-of-way. The whole thing should be up for conversation in our downtown areas and our urban areas, right? I know that that's a thing, but that is how we make everything fit, right? Like if you look at other areas around the world that have done this, around the country that have done this, it's taking lanes, and then you can make a lot of this good stuff happen.
Yeah, I mean, the two places where you can make it happen, one is in the travel lanes, parking lanes, et cetera. The other one is that, right now in our Complete Streets Design Guide, the frontage zone can be either outside the right-of-way or inside the right-of-way. And if it's outside the right-of-way, it's a public improvement and a public utility easement on private property. But in our downtown and town center areas, we have very few places where we have that or where we're actively planning for that. I think White Flint on 355, we have some places there where we just didn't have the space to put in the BRT, and that was, sort of required. But it may be something we have to consider more often as redevelopment occurs. Next
So
slide.
I'm just wondering, this is just for one side? If you have a street that has two sides, you need another 47-foot on that side?
We only dealt with one side, but this is ideally looking
I'm
at both
just
sides.
imagining if you have a 2-lane roadway or if you have a 4-lane roadway, you're gonna have a big wide, it creates a big separation between the two front of the buildings, that I thought the idea of having like a town center or downtown area or things like that to bring things closer to each other, that gives you a sense of community. And I just see that, I don't know, like if you have a town center boulevard or if you have a downtown boulevard, what is how many lanes of traffic it could be there? If it is 2 feet, we're making the traffic lane narrow. So you're gonna have like, if it is 2-lane, assuming 11-foot, 22-foot lane for traffic, and then you see these big, wide area, just when I imagine it to me, just looks a little bit not what the goal is, to bring things closer, to create a sense of community. I just don't see how it works out. It just looks like out of a scale. That's the right word that comes to my head. It's a little bit out of a scale, in my opinion, just imagining.
Yeah, if I may add one thought here, I think that's a very good point that you're making, Commissioner Pedram. One of the things that also comes into play is not only how wide the street is, but how tall the buildings are on either side of the street. So if you're looking at a downtown condition, well, first of all, I think most of these corridors, like Georgia Avenue, rarely will have just 2 lanes when it's going through an activity center. So currently, just looking outside, there's probably 6 lanes and a turning lane right at that intersection. So you're going to have a lot of pavement to kind of contend with. And to Commissioner Linden's point, you could take some of that space from some turning lanes if there's the ability to do that. But then a really important factor in how you feel when you're in that space is how tall the buildings are on either side. So if you had a 80-foot of sidewalk space on both sides and then just only 2 lanes of traffic, that's about 100 feet, give or take. If you ended up placing 20, 25, 30-foot tall buildings on both sides of that, it will feel extremely wide and out of context. However, if you had much taller buildings, like 6-story buildings, 8-story buildings, 10-story buildings, that road visually starts to feel a lot tighter, because now that ratio of the vertical to the horizontal is getting closer to a 1-to-1 ratio, which I think is, from a design perspective, what you want to achieve.
I agree. I think that all of those have to come into play. It's not just that. I totally agree what you're talking about. The other thing is that when you make them so wide, for pedestrian to come from one, they completely separate one side from the other side. And, thinking about a downtown boulevard or, I don't have exactly in my, in my mind that what is the number of lanes for each of these kind of different street types that you have. If they come 1 lane, 2 lane, what is the width and so on. I just look at it that if you're even assuming that it is 2 lane or even 4 lane, adding this on each side, it separates the communities from one side to another. It's sort of, I totally get it that it has to do with the height, even though if you have very high building, you look at the ones in Bethesda that are very high building, still, if you take one of those and try to put these things in, it still looks out of a scale. It's just too large, too big. That's my feeling. I just said that I tell you. I know that these are ideas right now. It's not really a policy or anything that we have, but it's just something to think about.
So I can try to address some of these.
Yeah, you can. One second, I know we have maybe 20 more slides to go or something. So why don't we do this? Why don't we'll hold our questions. You want to let you finish, and then because we'll have some questions. Okay. So why don't you finish up, and then we can provide.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so I'm gonna continue. So as Sophia explained, like we have 4 type of streets here, like Downtown Street, Town Center Street, Downtown Boulevard, and Town Center Boulevard. So to help visualize like all the street design parameter that you see here on the chart, we try to draw some of the sections and plans for 2 of these 4 types. Like we choose the Downtown Boulevard and Downtown Street. The Town Center would be just a little bit smaller in some of the dimension, but more or less would be the same. So we choose Downtown Boulevard and Downtown Street to showcasing it. And also we do this showcase in both conditions, as Sophie mentioned, the new and reconstruction conditions, as well as the retrofit or interim condition, which I'm going to walk you through all the slides for the sections and plan. So starting here with Downtown Boulevard in a new and reconstruction condition, where we have the generous dimension for each zone. Starting from left side of the section, you can see where the building meets the fronting zone, how the building with the green wall and green canopy can bring greenery to the public realm along the sidewalk. And you can see the example on the photo of the site visit that we did with Commissioner Linden yesterday. Shows one of the green wall at the base of the building. The 4-foot rain garden along the frontage zone can also bring shrubbery, small ornamental trees, as well as potential for like seating elements along the wall. So all of those will happen on the frontage zone at the beginning on the left side. Yeah, thank you for pointing at it. Next to that zone, we have the sidewalk zone and the buffer that separates the pedestrian and cyclists from the 2-way bike lane. In Boulevard, we have the 2-way bike lane, 11 foot. So minor trees and other landscaping elements within this buffer can also thrive and get to their fullest potential through providing the soil volume underneath the bike lane and partially underneath the sidewalk. We have to leave portion of the sidewalk for the underneath the sidewalk clear for the utilities that is accommodating underneath. So you can see that through the silver cell, that soil volume can get increased underneath the sidewalk and a portion of the sidewalk. Moving forward toward the street, we have another landscaping strip that provides the buffer between the cars, vehicles, and the bicycles. And that's where the large street trees, major street trees should be located. Within the combined soil volume that stretch underneath and combining the soil volume for the 2 buffers underneath to help them get to their full potential. So moving forward on the next slide, you can see the same condition for the downtown boulevard on the new and reconstruction in the plan view. And we would like to see like minor street trees that you see on the lighter green, planting closer to each other to provide shades for the sidewalk. And in between them, that's the area that provide opportunities for the street furnitures like benches, bike racks, pedestrian skills, lighting, all of that can accommodate it on that buffer zone. The image on the right also like shows how the building through their architecture element with the canopies on the base of the building can provide shade for the sidewalk along that wide sidewalk. So the other street type that we worked at it and start drawing it up was the downtown street in, again, in the new and reconstruction condition. Very similar to the downtown boulevard that we talked about it earlier, but some of the dimensions are narrower. Sidewalks are narrower, bike facilities are one way, so they are narrower than the boulevard. And the same technique has been incorporated in this section to bring the greenery and help the trees to thrive. In downtown street, we looked at two different scenarios or version, and the difference between them are between the pedestrian buffer, the small tree area, the pedestrian buffer that varies in a width. As Sufi explained, like in some area we don't have the luxury of have large buffer between the bikers and pedestrians. So when we do on version 1 that we looked at it, when we do have that buffer, that's the great opportunity to provide smaller street trees. And we're gonna look at the version 2, which is the absolute minimum of the 2-foot buffer. And I can explain that in a future slide. Again, the image on the right can show like movable planters that additionally like on the edge of the building can bring more greenery and decorative elements into the streetscape. The next slide is again, the same downtown street in the plan view shows like the 6-foot buffer between the bikes and pedestrians that on the version 2, you see that will go away. So here we do have the opportunity and dimension. So again, adding more soil volume underneath and how these 2 rows of the trees, the smaller and the major one on the street, how underneath they can go through, like the roots can use the soil volume underneath, can help with the tree to thrive. And the image that you see, it's the street furniture zone that can be accommodated between the minor trees that it's on the buffer zone. So the next slide here, you see the version 2 where we don't have the dimension for that buffer area. So that's on the absolute minimum of the 2-foot, and that's the area that we can add more shrubbery, small shrubs, pedestrian scale lighting. And again, like through the silver cell, we can create that soil volume that can extend all the way from the curb to half of the sidewalk, to help the trees on this, the only trees that is gonna happen on the street sections to survive and get to the fullest potential. The image on the right also shows seating that is incorporated into the sidewalk zone on the wall of the rain garden. That's some example showing that. So the next here, like you see the same version 2 as on the plan, and how that small buffer can, even though it's really small and 2-foot, can accommodate lighting for pedestrian and a small shrubbery. The image on the right again shows how those balconies from the base of the building can contribute into the greenery of the street as well, with having lush landscaping on the roof. So here on this slide, like we we found this slide to kind of like clearly emphasize on different zones that you can see that has been happening. This image has been taken from Seattle. So again, like starting from the building, that's the amenity zone, the first couple of feet. That's where we are proposing rain garden and other amenities happening there to beautify and greenery the streets. Then we have the clear sidewalk zone and clear bike lane zone that they are separated with the furniture zone or the minor species of the street trees. And that's where all the facilities of bike racks and benches can happen. And then toward the street, we have another buffer zone where the street trees, major street trees is happening. So we thought this kind of like showcased what is happening in the rear world. So throughout the future, like these couple of slides, I would like to also emphasize on the retrofit version, like the not as ideal as we have on the new construction, but again, like that's something that we have to work through what the existing downtown boulevard and downtown streets are. We do not have like the luxury of all the big facilities that we had on the new construction, but we try to incorporate in greenery as much as possible in this. So in these scenarios, as you see, the curb stays as is, and the bike facilities, as Sophia was explaining it, it's happening within the vehicular, within the street zone. Usually they take away like an extra travel lane or parking lane, and through the small buffer, which is usually like either with poles or striping or concrete panel, they separate the bike facilities from the vehicular travel. The oversized utilities is another challenge that we have to face in a retrofitting cross sections. And because of the utilities overhead, like the tree that is going to get planted under it is going to be limited to the minor street trees. But however, we try to, again, like increase the soil volume underneath as much as we could by bringing the silver cell under the sidewalk and help that tree to get to their potential. Similar elements, again, can happen on the frontage zone. It can still apply to bring more rain garden, planters, green walls, balconies on the base, on the top of the base of the building. All of that can still apply through this retrofitting the sections. So here, the downtown boulevard, again, the same scenario. You can see what's happening on the plan view of it. Again, like similar to, since there is a limitation on the street trees due to the overhead utilities, we recommend using like a shading devices that can bring shading into the sidewalks for the comfort of the people. These shading devices can be some sort of like a standalone structure based on, like similar to the photo that you see here, based on the usage of the building. If it's retail, that can be accommodated under the seating cafes and other activities. Downtown street in a retrofit cross-section. Here, similar to the interim condition, you see the bike lane. Again, it's within the street zone. It's a one-way bike facilities that it's separated by the concrete barrier. Again, we don't have the luxury of completely buffering in the bike facilities. Again, like overhead utility poles are along the streetscape buffer, but the same elements of the greenery can incorporate it to ensure the sufficient greenery provided and also increasing the soil volume underneath the tree and underneath the sidewalk. So the photo here shows the example of the rain garden that it's working through the rainy day to collect the water while providing a greenery in a very natural setting with the stones and shrubbery along the sidewalk. The last slide here is, again, downtown street in a retrofit. In the plan view, what you saw just right now in the section. And since there is a limitation with the street trees, again, like we are suggesting providing temporary shading device for the summertime to cover up and provide shade for the sidewalk. Those examples, as you see on the images, can be fabrics that can pull from the buildings to building or from lighting to the building. So all of that can create some sort of placemaking, bring pop-up colors, and help with the public realm, as well as providing safety and shade for the pedestrians. Moving forward, I'm going to pass it on to. Thank you.
Thank you, Natasha. For the record, Justine Ivan with Transportation Planning Division. And we're heading into the implementation challenges and recommendations. So we know that everything we discussed so far is what ideally should happen, but in real life implementation, there are several limitations to this. And to this end, we did some preliminary research and on some code, regulations, guidelines, provisions that could potentially serve as a barrier and limit the effective implementation of the Green Streets design framework. And for those, we have outlined what we will call short-term attainable recommendations / solutions to achieve implementing this approach countywide. And we can start off with section 4928 of the Montgomery County Code, with that requires all streets to be constructed or reconstructed following county standards. And there are instances when it is required to apply county standards to road construction and reconstruction. However, and for the most part, MCDOT uses the Complete Streets Design Guide as a guiding document for street construction or reconstruction, and therefore our recommendation here is to tackle this possible limitation, is to consider incorporating the Green Streets Design Framework into the Complete Streets during the next technical amendment of the Complete Streets Design Guide. Another limitation might be the 2024 street lighting design requirements, installation procedures, and specification, which establishes the criteria for the installation and location of lighting poles, which also may conflict with our recommendations. And to this end, our recommendation is to consider incorporating the Green Streets Design Framework in the next revision of the street lighting guidelines to ensure that the minimum required space for tree growth does not conflict with the street lighting guideline. And also identify and resolve any other potential conflicts like the height, dimensions, and type of streets lighting poles. Tied up into this is the MCDOT, is that MCDOT is the lead agency for tree planning. In other words, their standards determine where and how we should plant street trees along county roads. And these standards sometimes might be a little outdated and might also conflict with our recommendations. And so our recommendation for this will be that MCDOT and MNCPP should work in the pursuit of updating these standards to consider the findings under the Green Street Design Framework when determining the adequacy of the tree spacing. Another aspect to consider is site distance standards from MCDOT and M.SHA, which usually limit the number of trees that can be located within the right-of-way, especially at intersections. And so for this, we recommend coordinating with MCDOT and M.SHA to consider the Green Streets Design Framework when revising the requirements for the site distance to allow retaining or planting more trees within the right-of-way. And so other limitations to consider as well is the Fire Safety Code, which is Chapter 22 of the Montgomery County Code, which supersedes street construction or reconstruction standards from the county and the state. Another thing to consider is the availability of land in a constrained setting. A lot of our core areas and activity centers, as you may know, may have less space to actually accommodate the design parameters under this framework. And also, a lot of our streets and boulevards are built out as well, so it may require effort to make this vision a reality throughout the county. And finally, and this is probably one of the most eminent things, is like another limitation is cost. How much would it actually take to build to these specifications? That's a question that we might need to answer further down the line upon revisiting this framework in the future.
All right, to conclude and wrap up, so our recommendations are to revise the Complete Streets Design Guide to include this presented and eventually improved Green Street Design Framework. With this, we would like to see new cross-sections, new design parameters, zones, and subzones, including the species selection tool that Dom discussed earlier, updating the prioritization within constrained right-of-ways to include street trees and really take a good look at what's needed in constrained areas. And as Justine discussed, continue to analyze code challenges that we currently face and what can be done to address them. Here we are, the three of us, divisions, coming across lines. And this truly has been a very cool project to work on. We've really thought about this project thoughtfully, and through the process, we've learned to, understand where others are coming from and have this collaboration that we don't normally have in our day-to-day work program. So it's been very enlightening and an awesome thing to be a part of. And I would also like to thank you all for your attention and thank Tina and Atara specifically for their work on the Silver Spring design guidelines, because that document informed us greatly throughout this process. And also the team that created the Complete Streets Design Guide that we have today. They were both very informative and inspiring for this project. And thank you to our chiefs for their fearless leadership and giving us this space to innovate. And at this time, any questions, comments, or concerns you may have are welcomed.
Well, first I say this is amazing, and it shows what happens when you get various disciplines to get together and innovate. So I appreciate it. This is wonderful, and it's how I'm so proud of our group, both parks and planning, and how we get together and we're taking our work to the next step, and it's always being ahead of the curve. So thank you so much. I just had just a couple quick questions about next steps. I do agree that you should use this to update the streetscape standards. But before that, will you be talking with our other stakeholders and like you said, MCDOT, the developers, and our other and the public? To sort of also telling them about what we've done and getting any feedback before we go to the next step. But this is wonderful. And you're asking about, yes, we need to look at the costs and how's that and some of the costs and maintenance and things like that. So I really appreciate all you've done. I'm looking forward to the next steps, and this is a great example of how we're continue to make ourselves better. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Can I jump in real quick? 1 second. So I've got to go pick up my daughter. So I got to sneak off. I just wanted to say before I left, thank you. This is really interesting. I love the discussion of the trees. That is exactly the way the trees look outside my neighborhood, is that velvet little V shape, courtesy of the power company. But this is really interesting is how to integrate it. And I think there's a lot to be said for sort of thinking as you go from the building through to the road to back to the area, and to making it both active, comfortable, and as long, if we have an advantage of anything, it's the long-term planning and the things like trees and greening these spaces is useful in the neighborhood, long-term planning and thinking about the climate change. I think that's interesting. I really think the Silva cells are really cool. Those are neat. I didn't know you could do that. That's neat. But I really appreciated this. This is really nice, nicely done and nicely laid out, and pretty eye-opening for ways that we can take a look at this. So I appreciate it. I really do. And I wanted to just get that in there before I go and run to
And
art.
I don't want to go before you go because you talk about silver cells. I didn't know about silver cells, so I'm just checking it. I think it's a very neat idea. I don't know if it's new or not, but it looks structural element. I think the cost is probably 2 or 3 times. Then it has maintenance also that has to be concerned. So I do not know how practical it would be, because the cost, I think it's like doing an elevated deck or bridge, okay? And then they have their own thing that I was looking at it, and the installation is time. So something that we need to look into. And I totally agree, if this is a guideline for people to use, so this gives them all the ideas, that's perfect. But if we want to make it as something that, we are asking our development community to follow, then it's very important that we make sure that we get comments and from everyone, from all different aspects of the community to make sure that it's workable. Thank you.
So I kind of want to address both of your comments a little bit. The first one, I think, is just that where we go from here, and I think where we go from here, maybe the chiefs will talk about it a little bit, which is we go to another effort. As much as us, our team, we would like to go, continue on this. Additional work will be done. And I think what's also important is that, the complete streets, which I worked on with a lot of people at MCDOT and a lot of people here in the planning department, the numbers that we presented in this presentation, we didn't add dimensions. We used the dimensions in the complete streets design guide. And that guideline doesn't specify you need to widen the road. It just says in the space that you have, here's ways that you can plan for how to prioritize what you can put. So on many of the streets, we may not achieve even half of what's shown on these drawings, but it's the framework for building it. So thanks.
That is beautiful. That's why I don't know exactly what is the plan for future. That's what I was saying, that if it is a guide, it's fantastic. You provide it out there and gives people inspiration and ideas that how they could do. The silver cell, it's fantastic. It's just that how much of it, how long, and where, and if you can afford it. So, but it's good to know. I didn't know, and I learned about it.
If I could just really quickly just add a little bit to that. This isn't even guidelines yet. This is just some high-level ideas about where we would like to get to. The next step would be to work collaboratively with our partners to see what aspects of this we can start to advance. We absolutely understand that that there's challenges with this, that there's high costs, that there's maintenance. The right-of-way is very limited, but this can serve as a starting point for those discussions.
Great. Are there commissioners, comments, questions?
Yeah, just add my thanks to the team, and I'm really excited. So this is great, and I look forward to seeing what comes next with this, and I'm really excited about what comes next with the Innovation Lab in general. This is really cool, and we can go on and on. I'll leave it there because I'm very excited about where this could go in the future, and I don't want to take up too much time talking about that. But to the point that someone alluded to earlier, maybe the chair. How communicating this? So this is something that could be really exciting to the community, and I think will be really exciting to particular parts of the community. So often our touch points with community are where we're asking something from them, or we're engaging in a plan where they feel like, not to say that this is necessarily the reality, but they often feel like we're asking something from them, or they feel like we're doing something to them. And again, I don't think that's an accurate reflection of what we do, but this is an example of maybe something we could communicate to community. It's a touch point. It's something we could proactively show them, of our efforts to think differently and more creatively to enhance their communities, like outside of these planning processes. Like obviously this will come during development. This will come maybe through capital projects or whatever. But I hope that we can communicate this in some form or fashion to a broad group of stakeholders and also just residents, because I think it's an excellent example of the quality work that you all are doing, and oftentimes it's under the radar. And this and the other design guides and the other guides that we often have, but that really benefit people in ways they don't see. It's sort of the invisible stuff that happens in the background. So I think that could be powerful, and and also not that this is the main point of it, but just good kind of PR for what you all do.
Commissioner Bartley?
Thanks. What's interesting is I asked a question earlier today when we had the presentation with the data on the youth population, the children in Montgomery County, and how we could use that data. But what you all did today is show how you use information gathered in each individual's department and use it collaboratively to come up with new ideas and innovations. And I appreciate that. Thanks.
And well, thank you. And what Vice Chair Linden said, going to the community, I know they would love to have your ideas on trees, vegetation. Where they're always like, what kind of trees should I be planting in my yard, or what kind of under trees, the taller trees, and all that. I know my wife and I are always asking. So I mean, just the amount of data that you have that I know you're disseminating it to the public, but I know they would, just the more and more you could tell them what you do, all these things that they can do. So that would be wonderful. And I love the iTree software. I didn't know that there was you can look and it tells you I'm at, CO2 or green, whatever you do, and sequestration, all of that. That's kind of really neat. It's really fun. So thank you for bringing this to us. And okay, Director Sartori.
I wanted to add my own set of comments here to the team. I think this was a really great demonstration of how we can be very intentional with our efforts to be collaborative, to be innovative, to be creative, to be solutions-oriented, and to be focused on practical, concrete solutions that are implementable. And so I also want to say I'm really amazed because you did present this to our team a couple weeks ago, and I feel like you guys added a lot to it, and in response to the comments that we shared, some more concrete examples, things that we just saw yesterday in the Bridge District, and also things that we saw in Detroit at the National Planning Conference. So I thought that was really cool. So thank you, Sophia, Molly, Justine, Natasha, and Dom. But I also want to take a moment to thank Christina, Dave, and Atul for conceiving this idea and developing the Innovation Lab, the whole program. It's really, I just want to thank you guys for being outstanding leaders in our department, for inspiring your teams, and not just the 5 here, but everyone else who participated early on in this process and will get an opportunity to do again as we move on from here. But I want to thank you for completely buying into and embodying in the work that you do our department mission and the priorities that we've identified. So thank you.
Again, thank you so much. And then we're going to take so we need a 2-minute break for the next, we'll just take a 2-minute break to switch over, and then we'll start our last item of the day, which is item number 4, the roundtable discussion with Director Sartori will talk to us about the Community Planning Academy ceremony. Thank you. Bye now. Welcome back, everyone. We're on our last item of the day, which is the roundtable discussion by our planning director, Jason Sartori. And then we will end the formal session of the planning board meeting, and we all hope you all come back this evening from 5 to 7:30 for the Planning for Climate Change speaker series. Thank you.
Hello, Chair Harris, members of the board. For the record, I'm Jason Sartori, Planning Director, and this is a little unorthodox for me today. I'm presenting to you at the end of your meeting, and I decided to completely switch it up and present from the dais instead of down at the table. So, in part because I want to be able to look out and see our audience today, too. We've got some special things to go through. So if we could, I just wanted to give a quick overview of what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to give the usual look ahead to what we have going on, as well as some personnel updates. Normally I hold that to the end. I'm going to move that up so that we can spend the end of my presentation talking about the Community Planning Academy. So in terms of looking ahead, we're going to not look that very far, just to 5 o'clock this evening, just in less than an hour. We have our Net Zero That Pencils Out speaker series event, so I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. Also want to highlight this Saturday, May 2nd, is Montgomery Park's third annual, I believe, Sligo Creek Fest. And if you have not gone out to that before, I know the chair has and the vice chair. There was photos from last year's event that I had, and it is outstanding. And so we'll be participating in that, the planning department, but it is an outstanding parks event that's held every year now. And then on May 5th, that's next week, next Tuesday, the Impact Academy graduation will be held in the Kentland Community Center in Landover. So IMPACT is an acronym that stands for Increasing Manager Potential to Advance Commission Trailblazers. This is the Commission's internal leadership training program that we have for people all across the the Commission in both counties in all departments. And we have 4 people from the Planning Department who are graduating from the program this year, 3 in the Aspiring Managers track. We have John Ryder, who's with our Transportation Planning Division, Bianca Bonilla, who's with our Management Services Division, and Mariah Claiborne from our East County Planning Division. And then we have 1 person in the People Manager track, which is Alex Rixey, who's our Master Plan Supervisor, our multimodal Master Plan Supervisor in Transportation Planning. So we have that graduation on Tuesday, and looking forward to celebrating their accomplishments with that. I did want to also highlight that during the upcoming month of May, we're going to be celebrating several Heritage Month events and months of awareness, including Affordable Housing Month, Historic Preservation Month, Bike Month, Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, and Jewish American Heritage Month. So we look forward to having events and activities and just announcements even around those things. So I did mention our event tonight. Just a reminder again, this is the first event in a dynamic panel discussion series that we have planned with. This one will be moderated by Vice Chair Linden, and will be focused on how innovative design, smart financing, and integrated planning can make sustainable development achievable and cost-effective. Panelists from Red Brick LMD, Montgomery County Green Bank, and Perkins Eastman will share real-world experiences about delivering high-performance, low-carbon projects while demonstrating how sustainability goals can align with financial feasibility, market realities, and long-term value. The discussion will highlight the role of public-private collaboration, creative financing mechanisms, and thoughtful design in accelerating Montgomery County's path forward toward net zero development. And this event, along with the 2 others later in the year, it's free, it's open to the public, so please continue to encourage as many people as possible to attend. Several of us yesterday, as was mentioned earlier, got the opportunity to tour a red brick project yesterday, the Bridge District in Anacostia, and we got to see firsthand how they are making sustainable development work. And today's speaker from Red Brick, Dan McGee, was one of our panelists this evening, was one of our tour guides yesterday. So we got a little bit of a preview. And thank you to Paul Mortensen for organizing that yesterday. Okay, so turning to some personnel updates at planning, I did want to welcome Rachel Haller-Umana, who has joined the Design, Placemaking, and Policy Division as our new placemaking planner. She brings over 10 years of experience as the founder and executive director of Bike Walk Macon, where she had advocated for safe walking and biking facilities through place-based strategies, education, and community programming. Rachel holds a bachelor's degree from Mercer University and a graduate certificate in sustainable transportation from the University of Washington. We are very excited to welcome Rachel to our team. So, welcome, Rachel. And I'm very happy to announce that Parker Smith has been promoted to the Information Services Team Supervisor with the Communications and Engagement Division. Parker has been the acting supervisor since January of 2025, and in this role, he will oversee information counter operations, application fee processing, very important, DRC agenda coordination, also all of this is important, public inquiry response efforts, and MPIA coordination. And he will also serve as a public liaison for initiatives like the Community Planning Academy. Parker has been with Montgomery Planning since 2015 in a variety of roles, but I am really looking forward to seeing all that he will accomplish with his team in this role on a permanent basis. So congratulations, Parker. So with that, last week, we had the honor of attending the 2026 Maryland Sustainable Growth Award ceremony in Annapolis with Governor Moore, Secretary of the Maryland Department of Planning, Rebecca Flora, and Secretary of the Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development, Jake Day. The Planning Department was recognized for the Community Planning Academy with this year's award in the leadership category, which recognizes individuals and organizations that undertake advocacy, education, or other outreach to advance public support for sustainable growth methods. I want to thank Governor Moore and his administration for this honor, and especially thank Secretary Rebecca Flora, who serves as the chair of the Sustainable Growth Subcabinet and who is with us here today in the audience. Thank you. Secretary Flora has been a great supporter of the department and of the Planning Academy, and she even said in her remarks how she would like to see us, like to find a way to replicate the program across this entire state. She referred to the program as a model for developing an informed citizenry, as a way for people to be confident in showing up and being part of the process. I also had the chance I also had the chance to give a few remarks, and I shared with the group that it was, first of all, a tremendous honor to receive that recognition for leadership in planning, and especially in a state as diverse as Maryland, where it really requires us to open the planning process to as many people as possible, to build trust and to engage people where they are. I talked about how the Community Planning Academy empowers people with the tools, the resources, the knowledge that they need to confidently participate in efforts that will shape the future of their own communities, and how the program makes master planning, development, permitting, zoning, all the things that we talk about on a regular basis in this building, much more accessible and much less intimidating. And so we feel really proud of this program. And so before we go any further, I did want to share a video that the Maryland Department of Planning produced for our award. So Isaac, if you can go ahead and play that, that'd be great.
We are so excited about the Community Planning Academy. This whole program is about removing barriers to participation for Montgomery County residents about the planning process. We decided to take a novel approach to make it online, on demand, putting plans in people's hands. This has been a really exciting way to take a 101 level approach to the planning process. Everything from zoning, transportation, permitting, planning for schools, and how to participate in the process is included with the program. The idea is to give residents a baseline level of understanding so that they can talk to their friends and neighbors, come out to a planning board meeting, and be more involved in the process.
We want them to be engaged because it's their community. We have 10 modules. It goes through, each module talks about the planning, the zoning, Department of Permitting Services, how education fits in all of this piece. So by learning all the modules and learning the processes and learning the timing, they have a better chance of informing decisions that will take place over the next 20 years in their community.
The places, the communities, the neighborhoods that we live in don't just happen by chance. They don't just happen overnight. They happen through the planning process. But in order for it to reflect the values and the dreams and the vision of our community members, we need people to participate in that process. In order to be able to be active participants in a planning process, an educated public is one of the most important assets that we have in our community.
The planners get to know the community members, and the community members learn how the planning is done, how the planners go about doing it, and that exchange enriches both sides. And hopefully this will develop a long-term connection between the community and the planning department.
Montgomery County is home to some of the most diverse communities in the country. And so we knew with this program we needed to offer the Academy in English, Spanish, and Chinese. And we needed to offer it in a way that people could participate on their phone. And so that's what we did, and we're happy to say that it's going really well.
Having a program like the Community Planning Academy that makes all of those efforts accessible to as many people as possible is key to the future of our state and our county. Okay, thank you. Okay, so if we could go back, there we go. All right, I want to also take a moment to thank all of our amazing partners who have helped us with the Academy, including DPS, MCDOT, MCPS, the Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice, and our sister department over in Prince George's County, Prince George's Planning. We have with us today Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice Chief Equity Officer Tiffany Ward. Thank you, Tiffany. As well as Montgomery County Department of Transportation Deputy Director Haley Peckett, sitting next to her. Thank you both for your collaboration and coordination on the Academy. We could not have done this without you and others from your groups. Our other key partners are tied up in a number of things today, a lot of budget stuff happening right now. But we also have our consultants here, the Hatcher Group, with us. I want to acknowledge Project Lead Victoria Kane, who has been instrumental in guiding us through this entire effort on the consultant side, and we're so pleased that she is here with us today, as well as her two colleagues, Michael Mershon and Derek Turner. So thank you for your partnership. I also want to recognize our summer 2025 class of the Community Planning Academy. This was, we had nearly 50 residents that spent 8 weeks last summer working through the modules, providing feedback and serving as our community member advisors, if you will, to help us get the Academy on target and launched on time, which was last December. We have some members from that class that are here today, so if you're from that inaugural class, if you could raise your hand. Oh, yeah, thank you. I also want to recognize Councilmember Kate Stewart. She has been such a huge supporter of this program, even given our keynote address last year at our graduation in the fall. She's here with us today, and I want to just publicly recognize you for championing the Academy, especially under your leadership as council president last year. So thank you. And then, of course, there's our entire team that's worked on this internally here at Planning. A lot of people participated in this effort because when you pull together all of this content for the first time, we had to really pull on everyone's knowledge and expertise. And so I'm not going to read through everyone's name on this list, but they really did help write, strategize, organize information, review content, review the final products and modules. 36 staff members who had direct impact on this program. And if you're here today, please raise your hand or stand up to be acknowledged as well. Thank you. In particular, if we could go back to that for 1 second, sorry. I'm so used to being down there. I want to extend a special thanks to Bridget Breuer, Khalid Afzal. Look good at you one. Chris Pfeiffer in the back. Larissa Clevin also in the back there. Parker Smith, And Marin Hill. I don't see Marin. Your leadership and creativity really shaped this program into what it is, this deserving statewide recognition and serving as a statewide model. So congratulations to everyone involved. Your work continues to welcome more people into the planning process, adding more voices, and working towards the thriving communities that we strive for. So thank you. I just want to give a little bit of an update on where we are with the program. At this point, we have 26 people, since we started in December, 26 learners who, from 18 different zip codes across the county who have completed all 10 modules and will be prepared to graduate when we have our ceremony in June 4th. 141 learners have completed at least one of the modules. 517 people have signed up to participate in the program. And just on last week, on April 30th, well, that was this week, oh gosh. It's been a long week. I've been in Detroit, now I'm here, so it's okay. It was this week while I was away. 30 of our learners, current active participants, went on a field trip to Strathmore Square, where they got to see the 5 Squares project there and really see how the work that we do and the things that are learning about come to fruition. And then, of course, on June 4th, as I mentioned, we have our graduation ceremony with everyone who's completed all 10 modules. So here you can see the 10 modules. So just one final note I wanted to make is to remind everyone that it is open and it's free, it's online, and it's on demand, so you can participate in it on your own time and in multiple languages. Our residents can register by scanning that QR code, and you participate in these 10 mobile-friendly modules, each lasting about 30 to 45 minutes, that focus on key topic areas like development review, permitting, environmental planning, transportation planning, schools planning, master planning, everything. So I continue to encourage people to participate and get involved and then effectively come out and advocate for their communities. Finally, I want to turn things over to a video from our Council President, Natalie Fenny-Gonzalez, who sends her well wishes. She's tied up today in an Econ Committee meeting, again, talking through budget stuff. So she would otherwise be here. So if we could roll that.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Montgomery County Council President Natalie Fenny-Gonzalez. Today, the Council's budget work is preventing me from joining you, but I couldn't miss the opportunity to share my congratulations to the Planning Department on the Maryland Sustainable Growth Award for the Community Planning Academy. This is an exciting and well-deserved honor. I'm so proud of the department, the Planning Board, and all the residents who contributed to this program. Encouraging all residents to have an active voice in the future of our communities is an essential part of our work. We all know that planning and land use can be complex topics. When I was vice chair of the Planning Board, we worked hard to make planning work more accessible and equitable to all residents. The Academy helps educate community members and eliminate the perceived barriers. I love that the information provided is provided in multiple languages, making the planning process more accessible to our wonderfully diverse community. This award reflects the importance of giving residents clear and equitable pathways to understand how planning works and how they can help shape the future of our neighborhoods. I also want to thank Governor Wes Moore and the Maryland Department of Planning Secretary Rebecca Flora for shining a spotlight on programs that expand a public understanding and support sustainable community-driven growth. This award is a statement to Montgomery County's ongoing commitment to collaboration and inclusive engagement. Efforts like this help pave the way to a bright future. Great job, everyone. Enjoy the rest of today's wonderful event. Thank you.
So with that, I'm complete. I'll turn it to you guys if you have any questions on any of the stuff I presented today. And then once we're done, we'd like to ask everyone involved with the program to come up for a photo.
Yeah, this is wonderful. It's also an example, we just heard the planning department give their innovation lab presentation, and this is just another, an important example of innovation in the planning department. So I wanted to, on behalf of the board, the other members will speak for themselves, but I want to say how proud we are of the planning department for putting this together. I mean, it's a big outreach, right? And putting all the modules together and giving our residents in the county a voice, more of a voice. It's not a black box anymore, but it's a voice, and then they can have input in shaping to make better communities. So thank you so much, and thank you, Secretary Floor, for awarding this prestigious award to the Planning Department. We really appreciate it, and we appreciate you coming out today, and all those that worked on this plan. Thank you. Any other comments from the board members?
Just briefly, just add my congratulations. I know we've talked about this a little bit before, but I really believe that engagement is the hardest thing that we do, and it will probably always be the hardest thing that we do. But this is such a great example of, like you mentioned, meeting people where they are, and not expecting them to take the first step, not expecting them to know things, and not expecting them to speak our language. So it's empowering, and I think it enriches the whole process, and it enriches our plans, and ultimately the community that flows from everything. So thanks to everyone, and it's really exciting to see where this is going to continue to go. Thanks.
Thanks so much. Thanks for everyone coming out, and we're going to take this beautiful picture. Thank you. And this will end our planning board meeting for today. Thank you for everyone that listened, and we'll see you next Thursday. Bye now.